Welcome back to Superbly Said Advanced English Vocabulary and Phrases. Today's material is drawn directly from a SpeakDuo lesson, and you can head over to SpeakDuo.com right now to meet new people from around the world who are practicing English on video calls to, become more confident with their speaking abilities.
Yeah, and today our focus is squarely on advanced English learners. I mean, people who already have a solid foundation but really want to stop relying on just basic descriptions.
Right.
The mission for this deep dive is to equip you with nuanced, high-level idioms and phrases. We're looking at the kind of vocabulary that adds real precision to your communication and which will completely changes how you are perceived by colleagues, bosses, or even an IELTS examiner.
So let's just jump right into the narrative of professional communication, because anytime you are pitching an idea or explaining a situation, you really have to set the scene. You have to establish what is entirely ordinary and what is profoundly unusual. So the baseline word we have in the SpeakDuo material for ordinary is commonplace. But honestly, I have to ask, why wouldn't I just say something is normal or everyday? What is the actual mechanical advantage of using commonplace?
Well, it really comes down to human psychology and habituation. Like when you say something is normal, you are basically just stating a fact about its frequency. But commonplace carries a very specific weight. It describes something that is so intensely familiar, it has become almost invisible.
Invisible.
Yeah, our brains filter it out to save energy.
Okay, so it's not just that a thing happens a lot, it's that we've completely stopped caring that it happens.
Precisely. I mean, think about a workplace meeting. If you say smartphones are normal in meetings, that's just a neutral observation.
Right, nobody cares.
Right. But if you say the distraction of smartphones has become commonplace,
Right.
you are diagnosing a subtle problem. You're telling your boss or an examiner that this thing is blended into the furniture so much that no one is even questioning it anymore. It implies a loss of wonder or a loss of attention.
Oh, wow. That makes a lot of sense. You are describing the environment's actual effect on people. So, let's swing the pendulum to the absolute opposite end. The material gives us the word grotesque. And again, I have to challenge this a bit.
Sure.
Because ugly is the go-to word, right? Does grotesque just mean very, very ugly? Because that feels a little bit dramatic for a standard conversation.
It is traumatic, yeah, but doesn't just mean very ugly. Grotesque involves this sort of unsettling distortion, like if a building is ugly, it might just have a boring design or a bad coat of paint.
Yeah.
But if a building is grotesque, its proportions are entirely wrong. It actively offends the eye. The real nuance here is that grotesque triggers a visceral, almost physical reaction of discomfort.
Right, like the uncanny valley.
Exactly.
It's not just unattractive, it's wrong.
Right.
And if I'm giving an architectural pitch, I wouldn't call a competing design ugly. I'd say, they went with this harshly angular, grotesque facade. It paints the competitor's design as something that actually assaults the senses.
You are absolutely weaponizing the vocabulary to make a stronger argument. Now, let's look at a phrase for setting a physical or conceptual scene. Off the beaten track. The common trap here is substituting it directly with isolated or remote.
Which implies being lost, right? I mean, if I'm isolated, I probably didn't want to be there.
Exactly. Isolated implies a lack of connection. But off the beaten track implies agency and deliberate intention. You are choosing not to follow the crowd.
Oh, I see.
In an IELTS Part 2 exam, for example, examiners hear the word remote 1,000 times a day. But if you are asked to describe a memorable trip, and you say, I discovered a peaceful, quiet little village off the beaten track, you suddenly sound adventurous. You sound like someone who seeks out unique experiences.
Let me push this further, though. I get how that works for a literal hike in the woods, but what about corporate life? Can a marketing strategy be off the beaten track? Or does that just sound like we got lost on the way to the boardroom?
No, it actually works beautifully as an advanced metaphor in business. Like, if your team is stuck in a rut, proposing a solution that is off the beaten track tells your boss that you understand the conventional methods, but you are deliberately exploring an unconventional, highly creative angle.
It shows initiative.
Exactly. It demonstrates you can manipulate spatial idioms to describe abstract concepts.
Okay, so we've set our scene, we've got commonplace routines, maybe a grotesque competitor, and we are taking our strategy off the beaten track. But any narrative eventually hits friction.
Naturally.
So the SpeakDuo material moves into describing frustrations. Let's look at the word conundrum. I hear this a lot, and, well, it always feels like someone is just putting a $10 word over a 10-cent problem.
That is a very fair critique. I mean, it really is, but there's a mechanical difference. A problem usually has a linear solution. If a server goes down, the problem is a power outage. You fix it.
Right.
But a conundrum is distinctly confusing. It is a puzzle that possesses no obvious, painless solution.
So it's about the mental knot. If I get fired, that's a problem. But if I get two incredibly lucrative job offers in two different countries, and choosing one means totally abandoning the other, that is a personal conundrum, both options are good, but I'm paralyzed.
Exactly. A conundrum requires deep, often philosophical thought. Now, what if the friction isn't just a puzzle, but something genuinely disastrous? The material highlights for this is diabolical.
Come on, diabolical. That sounds like a comic book supervillain monologue. Is anyone actually using this in a serious professional setting?
They absolutely do, particularly in British and Commonwealth English, to describe extreme, shocking severity. It's hyperbole, yes, but it serves a very specific purpose. You wouldn't use it for a paper jam.
Well, I hope not.
Right. But if there is a massive scheduling error that deletes a month of client data and doubles everyone's workload, calling it a bad error is a massive understatement. Calling it a diabolical failure matches the emotional weight of the disaster.
It acknowledges the pain the team is feeling. It says, hey, I know this is wicked. What about a situation where the problem isn't a massive explosion, but just evasiveness? The word here is slippery.
Yeah, slippery is all about a lack of traction. If you describe a task or a person as difficult, that's just vague. But if you describe a negotiation as slippery, you are giving a physical characteristic to an abstract process.
Like trying to grab a wet bar of soap.
Exactly.
So at work, dealing with a slippery supplier means that every time you think you have pinned down the contract terms, they just slide away and change the agreement.
That lack of leverage is incredibly frustrating. And speaking of frustration, we have two verbs that describe interpersonal friction. The first is vex. Why wouldn't we just say someone angered us?
I feel like anger is too explosive. Anger is like flipping a table. Vexing feels more like a mosquito buzzing in your ear while you're trying to sleep.
That is the perfect analogy. To vex someone is to cause a mild, repeated, slow-burning irritation. If a coworker has a habit of constantly interrupting meetings, it doesn't incite a violent rage.
Yeah.
It vexes you. It's the dripping faucet of office dynamics.
Which actually brings us to the most fascinating word in this entire list. Incommode.
Yes, incommode.
The material compares it to inconvenience, but notes its high formality. I have to admit, if I walk into my boss's office and say, I hope I'm not incommoding you, I feel like I need to be wearing a tuxedo. It sounds incredibly pretentious.
Well, it is highly formal, but that formality is a strategic tool. Think of it as creating psychological distance. When you have to deliver an annoying problem to a superior, you want to disarm them. Using hyper-polite vocabulary like incommode acts as a buffer.
So it's like putting on a verbal top hat. You are elevating the respect level so high that they can't instinctively be annoyed with you. I hope my early arrival does not incommode you. You are basically wrapping the inconvenience in bubble wrap.
Exactly. You are managing their emotional response through lexical choice. So, we've encountered our diabolical conundrums and our slippery suppliers. How do we react? Let's move to the response vocabulary. First up, ascertain.
Ascertain, instead of just saying find out. But ascertain feels much heavier.
It carries an investigative, almost legal weight to it. You don't ascertain what's for dinner. You ascertain facts to completely remove doubt. Like, if an incident happens at work, a manager needs time to check reliable sources and ascertain the truth. The word itself promises absolute certainty.
Which sets up the next word beautifully. Candid. Once you ascertain the facts, you might have to deliver them. People use candid as a synonym for honest, but in my experience, people often use candid as a free pass to just be cruel. Like, I'm just being candid.
Oh yeah, that is a very common misuse. True candor isn't about cruelty, though. It's about stripping away polite fluff. Think of a candid photograph. It's unposed, it's real. So in a professional feedback session for a failing project, a candid assessment means you aren't hiding behind corporate jargon. You are giving the straightforward, unvarnished truth because the situation absolutely demands it.
You need candor to fix the diabolical mess. And to push through that mess, the material gives us tenacity. Now, I want to contrast this with stubbornness. Aren't they basically the exact same mechanism in the brain, just refusing to stop?
Mechanically, yes, they are very similar, but socially they are opposites. Stubbornness is blind and usually negative. It's refusing to change course even when you're clearly wrong. Tenacity, however, is immensely positive. It is a purposeful, admirable determination to endure pain or difficulty for a worthy goal.
Okay, so in an IELTS exam, if they ask about a challenge you overcame, you don't say you were stubborn, you say your tenacity helped you keep practicing until you passed the exam, or your tenacity got you across the finish line of a marathon. It frames your endurance as a heroic trait.
Precisely. But, the human body isn't built to be tenacious 24/7. Which brings us to our final response word, languid.
I love the phonetic sound of this word. It actually sounds slow, languid.
The phonetics perfectly match the meaning. It is often compared to lazy, but the psychological difference is vast. Lazy has a harsh, judgmental sound, and it implies a failure of obligation. Languid is a pleasantly slow, relaxed, and unhurried pace, completely free from guilt.
If a coworker calls you lazy, it's an insult to your work ethic. But if someone calls your weekend afternoon languid, it's a compliment to your relaxation skills. You take a languid walk by the river on a hot afternoon. It's elegant.
It totally removes the shame from resting. Finally, let's look at the vocabulary of outcomes. How do we articulate the final standing of a project? The material uses the phrase, secured a situation.
Not just finished, because finished means it's stopped. Secured means it's safe.
Right, think of locking a vault. If you successfully arrange the travel bookings or sign a contract, you haven't just completed a task. You have secured the situation, meaning the team's anxiety can drop. The foundation is solid.
But what if you fail to lock that vault? The phrase here is slip through someone's fingers. This is vastly more evocative than just saying you lost a deal.
Because it relies on a physical metaphor. It implies proximity. If you lose a deal, maybe you never had a chance in the first place. But if a promising internship slips through your fingers, the nuance is that it was right there in your hand, but you hesitated. You missed the signing deadline. The tragedy of the near miss is baked right into the phrase.
It makes the loss feel deeply personal when you explain it to a boss. Our final outcome phrase is forfeit something. How is this mechanically different from simply giving up?
It's about volition and rules. You give something up voluntarily, but you forfeit something as a penalty imposed by a system.
Oh, so it's the rule of law. You forfeit an application fee or a deposit because you canceled a reservation too late. You didn't generously give the money away. The contract dictated that you lost it because of an infraction.
Exactly. The precision of forfeit shows a deep understanding of structural consequences.
All right, this brings us to the interactive challenge for this deep dive. We're going to test this advanced vocabulary right now to ensure these concepts don't just, well, slip through your fingers.
I see what she did there.
Thank you. I am going to read out option A, option B, and option C verbatim from the SpeakDuo prompt, and I will heavily repeat the target phrase so you know exactly what we are hunting for.
And we want you to actively recall the psychological nuances and the specific metaphors we just broke down.
Let's do it. Question 1. Which sentence uses the phrase off the beaten track correctly based on context? We are looking for the right way to go off the beaten track.
The highly popular tourist destination is completely off the beaten track this busy summer.
We eventually discovered a remarkably peaceful little village completely off the beaten track today.
The frustrated marathon runner accidentally sprinted completely off the beaten track during the race. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
And the correct answer is option B. We eventually discovered a remarkably peaceful little village completely off the beaten track today. Recall our discussion about agency and deliberate choice. It's not an accident like the marathon runner in option C. It's the intentional discovery of a quiet place away from the crowd. That is what it truly means to go off the beaten track.
Perfect. Question 2. Select the context where the verb vex someone is most appropriately used. Let's figure out the proper way to vex someone.
The incredibly complicated mathematical equation managed to completely vex someone with a mysterious spell.
The highly skilled professional doctor successfully managed to safely vex someone against the disease.
His incredibly frustrating habit of constantly interrupting meetings would frequently vex someone very easily. Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer is option C. His incredibly frustrating habit of constantly interrupting meetings would frequently vex someone very easily. Think back to the mosquito metaphor we used. It is not a mysterious spell. It is the mild, slow-burning, repeated irritation of office dynamics that will truly vex someone.
Right on. Question 3. In which situation does someone accurately experience something languid? Let's locate the languid scenario.
We thoroughly enjoyed a remarkably peaceful and incredibly languid afternoon walking alongside the river.
The highly aggressive corporate lawyer delivered an exceptionally languid argument during the intense trial.
The brilliant young computer programmer efficiently developed a completely languid software application this morning. You can go ahead and pause the audio here if you need a second to decide.
The correct answer is option A. We thoroughly enjoyed a remarkably peaceful and incredibly languid afternoon walking alongside the river. Remember our contrast with the harshness of the word lazy. An aggressive lawyer or an efficient programmer doesn't fit the phonetic softness of a completely guilt-free, unhurried, languid experience.
Question 4. Which response best demonstrates the correct usage of the noun conundrum? We need the perfect conundrum.
The powerful, massive musical instrument produced a beautifully resonant conundrum throughout the concert hall.
The strict university professor strongly demanded a massive written conundrum before granting the extension.
Choosing between two equally fantastic, lucrative career opportunities presented an incredibly difficult personal conundrum. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
It is option C. Choosing between two equally fantastic, lucrative career opportunities presented an incredibly difficult personal conundrum. It's not an essay or a sound. It is that mental knot. It's the puzzle with no easy solution that elevates a basic problem into a true conundrum.
Moving along, question 5. How would a professional accurately use the formal verb incommode someone? Let's appropriately incommode someone.
Highly advanced luxury hotel perfectly managed to comfortably incommode someone during the vacation.
I sincerely hope my unexpectedly early arrival tonight will not seriously incommode someone here.
The incredibly wealthy technological entrepreneur decided to heavily incommode someone with an expensive gift. Go ahead and pause the deep dive here if you want to weigh the options.
The answer is option B. I sincerely hope my unexpectedly early arrival tonight will not seriously incommode someone here. This relies directly on our verbal top hat strategy. It is the hyper-polite, formal apology designed to create psychological distance so you do not incommode someone.
Excellent. Question 6. Which scenario perfectly illustrates the ability to ascertain something? You want to correctly ascertain something.
The incredibly thorough private investigator desperately needed more time to securely ascertain something factual.
The highly skilled mountain climber tried to quickly ascertain something steep during the expedition.
The completely exhausted warehouse worker managed to safely ascertain something incredibly heavy this morning. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer is option A. The incredibly thorough private investigator desperately needed more time to securely ascertain something factual. You don't ascertain physical weight or steepness. You deploy investigative effort to remove doubt and absolutely ascertain something to be true.
Question 7. Which sentence accurately utilizes the idiomatic phrase slip through someone's fingers? We don't want this concept to slip through someone's fingers.
The exceptionally slippery, expensive moisturizing soap somehow managed to slip through someone's fingers today.
The incredibly promising international business deal unfortunately managed to slip through someone's fingers yesterday.
The highly skilled, talented young musician let the beautiful melody slip through someone's fingers. Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer is option B. The incredibly promising international business deal unfortunately managed to slip through someone's fingers yesterday. While option A uses the literal physical action, option B captures the idiomatic tragedy of the near miss, the hesitation that causes an opportunity to slip through someone's fingers.
Finally, question 8. Which of the following statements correctly uses the verb forfeit something? Let's accurately forfeit something.
Because they completely missed the strict official deadline, they must unfortunately forfeit something valuable.
The highly talented master chef decided to carefully forfeit something delicious during the competition.
The incredibly cunning, dangerous criminal attempted to illegally forfeit something highly secure this afternoon. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer is option A. Because they completely missed the strict official deadline, they must unfortunately forfeit something valuable. This relies on the rule of law we discussed earlier. You don't just voluntarily give it away. A penalty is imposed because a rule was broken, forcing you to forfeit something.
That brings us to the end of our deep dive into these nuances. We set the scene, navigated the diabolical friction, formulated a candid response, and analyzed the outcomes. But beyond just passing a vocabulary test, what is the core takeaway for the listener here?
The core takeaway is a concept called linguistic determinism. It's the idea that the exact words you use actually shape your psychological reality.
Wow. Okay.
Think about it. If you only ever call your workplace challenges problems, your brain instinctively goes into a stress response. It feels heavy, like a threat. But if you begin labeling those exact same challenges as conundrums, your brain recognizes a puzzle. It reframes the threat into an intellectual challenge that requires a thoughtful, perhaps even tenacious solution. Your vocabulary doesn't just describe your world, it actively builds the framework of how you experience it.
That completely changes the stakes. It's not just about sounding smart, it's about giving yourself better mental tools to navigate reality. I highly encourage you to take these advanced phrases out into your next conversation. Maybe jump onto a SpeakDuo call today and experience firsthand how deploying a precision vocabulary changes not only how you feel, but how the world responds to you. Keep pushing past the commonplace, and we will catch you on the next one.